The sky turned dark over New York at noon. Jack Howard stood on the roof of the North American Defense Coalition headquarters, his eyes fixed on the massive ship that blocked the sun. It wasn't alone. Satellite feeds showed similar vessels positioning themselves over every major city on Earth. "Sir, you need to see this," said a young officer, his voice shaking. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." Jack rushed back to the command center. On every screen, the same image appeared, a tall, gray-skinned being with 4 arms and eyes that glowed purple. Its mouth didn't move, but words echoed through speakers worldwide. "People of Earth, I am Admiral Zexturian of the Tarvani Empire. Your planet is now under our protection. Resistance is unnecessary and unwise. Your leaders will receive instructions shortly. Remain calm and comply." The broadcast ended. Phones rang constantly as panic spread. "Get me the president," Jack ordered, but communications to Washington were already jammed. 3 floors below, Susan Miller watched the same broadcast with different eyes. As the leading xenolinguist for the coalition, she noticed something odd about the translation. "Play it again," she told her assistant. When the message repeated, she pointed to her screen. There, the word they're translating as protection doesn't match their body language. They're hiding something. Susan worked through the night, analyzing every frame of the broadcast. By morning, she had her answer. The Tarvani language had subtle differences that their translation matrix hadn't fully masked. They weren't offering protection. They were claiming ownership. World leaders gathered in an emergency United Nations session to prepare for the first face-to-face meeting with the aliens. Susan tried desperately to reach the Secretary General with her findings. "You don't understand," she told the guards at the UN entrance. "They're not here for diplomatic relations. They're harvesting worlds." The guards looked at each other nervously but maintained their position. "Ma'am," without proper clearance. "Let her through." Jack Howard appeared behind them, showing his credentials. "She's with me." As they hurried through the corridors, Susan explained her discovery. "They see us as a resource, not a species to negotiate with. Their language has specific terms for energy-producing beings. That's how they categorize us." "Energy? What kind of energy?" "From what I can piece together, they feed on something like psychic energy. They've done this before, Jack. They find planets with sentient life, process the population, and move on." They rounded the corner to the main chamber but found their path blocked by 2 tall Tarvani guards. Their armor gleamed under the lights, and they carried strange weapons that hummed with energy. "Unauthorized personnel," one stated flatly, its voice metallic through a translator. "Return to your designated areas." Jack stepped forward. "We have urgent information for our leaders. This meeting can't proceed without." The guard moved with surprising speed, striking Jack across the chest. He flew backward, crashing into a wall. Susan screamed and ran to him, but the second guard grabbed her arm. In the struggle that followed, Jack recovered quickly, more quickly than the aliens expected. He tackled the guard holding Susan, both of them tumbling to the floor. The alien's armor cracked against the marble, and it let out a high-pitched shriek. The second guard aimed its weapon, but Susan grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and sprayed it directly in the alien's face. It recoiled, dropping its weapon and clutching at its eyes. Jack was surprised by how easily the guard had been injured. Despite their advanced technology, the Tarvani seemed physically weaker than humans. The guards called for backup on their communicators as Jack and Susan fled down a service corridor. "Did you see that?" Jack asked, breathing hard as they ran. "They're fragile." Susan nodded, pieces clicking together in her mind. "That's why they need their armor and weapons. Their bodies evolved for a different gravity or atmosphere. They're physically vulnerable." "And now we know," Jack said grimly. "We need to get this information out before." An alarm blared throughout the building. A new message. 3 months passed. The world under Tarvani rule was a different place. Cities operated under strict curfews. Strange buildings called tribute centers rose in every major population area. Humans who entered rarely came out. Those who did were empty shells, their minds gone. Deep beneath the ruins of Chicago, Jack Howard studied a hand-drawn map. The underground bunker had once been a storage facility for the city. Now it housed the largest resistance cell in North America. Their patrol patterns changed again, said Alan Wright, placing red markers on the map. The former Navy SEAL had lost his wife and daughter during the initial takeover. His eyes held little emotion now, just cold determination. "They're adapting," Jack replied. "But so are we." Susan Miller entered the room, followed by Diane Lopes. The engineer carried what looked like a modified radio. "We decoded more of their communications," Susan said. "The tribute center in Old Milwaukee is processing 300 humans daily." Jack's fist tightened. Processing was the Tarvani word for draining humans of their psychic energy. The aliens fed on it like a drug. "But we found something else," Diane added, setting down her device. "There's another alien species working for them. Not Tarvani. They call them Kilari." "Slaves or allies?" Jack asked. "Slaves, definitely," Susan answered. "Their language shows patterns of forced compliance." Paul Johnson, who had been a high school physics teacher before the invasion, joined them. His glasses were taped at the bridge, but his eyes were bright with discovery. "I've been studying the recordings from our last encounter," he said. "The Tarvani reacted strangely to certain sounds. I think their hearing is different from ours. Certain frequencies might hurt them." Jack looked at the group. In 3 months, they had grown from frightened survivors to a fighting force. Each brought different skills. Each had lost everything to the Tarvani. "It's time," he said simply. "Tonight we hit the Milwaukee Center." The plan was simple but dangerous. They would enter through the waste disposal system, plant Diane's disruptors to disable security, and free as many prisoners as possible. They needed information, too, how the processing worked, if it could be reversed. That night, they moved through the sewers beneath the center. The smell was terrible, but the Tarvani never guarded these areas. Their sensitive noses couldn't handle the stench. Inside, they split into teams. Jack and Alan headed for the security hub. Susan and Paul searched for prisoners. Diane went to plant her devices. Susan and Paul found rows of humans in glass chambers, tubes connected to their heads. But they also found something unexpected: small gray aliens with large eyes monitoring the machines. "Kilari," Susan whispered. One of them turned, spotting them. Paul raised his weapon, but Susan stopped him. The Kilari made a strange gesture, pointing to a control panel, then to a door. Was it helping them? Meanwhile, Diane was planting her last device when she heard something. A Kilari stood watching her, but it made no move. Susan sat with HFY in a quiet corner of the bunker. The small gray alien had thin arms and large, sad eyes. Susan was teaching her English while learning about the Tarvani. "Their world died," HFY explained in her soft voice. "Many suns ago. No food, no water. So they became conquerors," Susan said. HFY nodded. "They take, never give. Strong rule weak. This is their way." "What about your people, the Kilari?" "First world they took. We fought, but not like humans. We lost hope." Susan wrote everything down. Understanding the enemy was just as important as fighting them. In another room, Paul tested his theory about sound. He had built a device that made high-pitched noises. When he turned it on, the 3 Kilari who had joined them showed no reaction. But when he adjusted to a specific frequency, HFY came running. "That sound," she said, eyes wide. "Tarvani hate. Hurts their inner ear." Paul grinned. "Now we have a weapon." Jack gathered everyone to plan Alan's rescue. The execution was set for noon the next day in the city center. It would be heavily guarded, but the Tarvani wanted an audience. They would force humans to watch. "They want to break our spirit," Jack said, "but they don't understand humans at all." Diane had modified Paul's sound device into small portable units. Each team member would carry one. They also had a few guns taken from Tarvani guards, though ammunition was scarce. That night, none of them slept well. Alan had been their strongest fighter. More than that, he was their friend. Morning came too quickly. The team moved through underground tunnels toward the city center. They wore ragged clothes to blend with the crowd the Tarvani would gather. At the surface, they emerged one by one. The square was filled with humans, brought by Tarvani guards to witness the execution. A platform had been built, and on it stood Sub-Commander Vexorian. His purple armor gleamed in the sunlight. At his feet, 6 months had passed since the Tarvani arrived. Their ship still darkened skies worldwide, but something had changed. Humans no longer watched in fear. They fought back. In Mexico City, farmers blocked roads to tribute centers with their tractors. In Cairo, people used mirrors to blind Tarvani guards sensitive to bright light. In Tokyo, hackers disrupted alien communications. Small acts of defiance grew into organized resistance. High above Earth, Lisa Garcia floated in the darkness of the International Space Station. Most crew had been forced to return when the invasion began, but Lisa stayed hidden. The Tarvani ignored the station, thinking it abandoned. For months, she had worked alone, maintaining systems and watching Earth. Now she had a purpose. Using the station's powerful communication equipment, Lisa connected resistance groups worldwide. Chicago Cell, this is Skywatch, she radioed. Beijing reports successful operation. 20 prisoners freed. Jack Howard's voice crackled back. Good work, Skywatch. Any word from London? Negative. Communications blackout for 12 hours now. Jack frowned. Since his shoulder wound healed, operations had increased. Paul's sonic weapons gave them an edge, but the Tarvani were adapting, developing shields to block the sound. Diane entered the room, her hands dirty from working on equipment. The new jammers are ready, she said. We can block their signals for about 3 minutes now. Good work, Jack nodded. We'll need them for Rio. The situation in Rio de Janeiro was critical. The Tarvani had discovered the local resistance leaders and demanded their surrender. If they didn't come forward, Sub-Commander Vexorian threatened to destroy the city as an example. The team gathered around the radio as a transmission came from Brazil. The resistance leader, Carlo, spoke quickly. They've given us until sunrise. We won't surrender, but we can't evacuate 3 million people. We're sending help, Jack promised, though he wasn't sure what they could do from thousands of miles away. As dawn broke over Rio, Tarvani ships positioned themselves above the city. Vexorian's voice boomed from speakers. Deliver the rebel leaders to the central plaza immediately. The streets remained empty. The Tarvani prepared their weapons. Then something unexpected happened. People emerged from buildings, not just a few, but thousands. They filled the streets, walking silently toward the central plaza. Men and women of all ages joined together, forming a human barrier around the building where the resistance leaders hid. The Tarvani ordered them to disperse. No one moved. Kneel, commanded Vexorian. The crowd remained standing. Vexorian ordered his guards to aim weapons at the crowd. Still, no one knelt. No one ran. In Chicago, Jack and his team watched through a hacked Tarvani feed. They held their breath. He'll fire, Alan said grimly. He doesn't care how many he kills. But something strange was happening. Among the Tarvani guards, the Kilari servants were moving slowly, delaying, accidentally dropping equipment. One Kilari looked directly at a camera and made a subtle gesture, the same one Ex-Vala used to show respect to the resistance. Vexorian screamed at his troops to fire. Some did, but most hesitated. The humans still didn't move, even as some fell. Finally, Vexorian stormed back to his ship, ordering a retreat. The Tarvani couldn't kill an entire city without revealing their weakness to the world. In the bunker, celebrations erupted. Susan hugged Ex-Vala, who watched the screen with wide eyes. My people see, the Kilari whispered. Other worlds watch humans. You give hope, Aboard the mothership, Admiral Zex Turian received the report from Rio with cold anger. Increase processing quotas, he ordered Kex Loren. Double the harvest rate. Admiral, the scientist said carefully, the humans are showing resistance to the process. Increasing quotas may accelerate their adaptation. Are you questioning orders? Zex Turian's eyes glowed dangerously. No, Admiral, but this species is different. The Admiral turned to the viewing window, looking down at Earth. All species believe they are special, until they kneel. These humans will kneel or they will die. But as resistance spread across Earth, a terrible thought grew in the Admiral's mind. What if these humans really were different from all the others? Jack studied the maps spread across the table. After Rio, resistance groups worldwide gained strength. People shared weapons, information, and hope. But the Tarvani were still dangerous. Their ships use a special communication system, Diane explained, pointing to her diagrams. It's like a web connecting all their forces. If we cut that web, they can't coordinate. Susan nodded. The Kilari told us the main hub is in London. If we can shut it down, the Tarvani will be blind for hours. The plan formed quickly. Jack, now fully recovered, would lead a team to infiltrate the London hub. Susan would go to translate any alien text. Diane would handle the technical work. I've created a virus, Diane said, holding up a small device. If we plug this into their main system, it will freeze their network for 12 hours. 12 hours to hit every processing center on Earth, Alan added. His face had hardened since his capture and rescue. Lisa has coordinated with groups worldwide. When the signal goes dark, everyone attacks at once. Paul handed out improved sonic weapons. I've adjusted the frequency. These should work even with their new shields. That night, they boarded a small plane. One of their allies was a former pilot who could fly under Tarvani radar. The journey to London was dangerous but necessary. They landed outside the city and traveled underground through old subway tunnels. London was heavily guarded, with Tarvani patrols everywhere. Their hub is in that tower, Jack whispered, pointing to a tall building that had once been a famous landmark. Now it glowed with alien technology. Using Kilari information, they found a service entrance. Enkstvala had taught them how to move like Kilari servants, heads down, steps small and quick. They wore gray robes similar to Kilari clothing. Inside, they moved carefully through the halls. Susan read the alien symbols on the walls, guiding them toward the central control room. 2 guards at the door, Jack whispered, peering around a corner. I'll handle it, Alan said, activating his sonic device. The guards fell, clutching their heads in pain. The team rushed forward, dragging the aliens into a side room. The control center was massive, filled with glowing screens and strange equipment. Diane went straight to the main console. Cover me, she said, beginning to work. This will take a few minutes. Jack and Alan stood guard while Susan examined the alien text scrolling across screens. Wait, she said suddenly. Something's wrong. These aren't normal communications. They're calling for reinforcements from their home system. Before they could react, a door opened. A Tarvani in a scientist's uniform entered, then froze upon seeing them. Jack raised his weapon, but the alien raised its hands. Do not shoot, it said in perfect English. I am Kex Loren. I have been expecting someone to try this. He's the lead scientist. Susan whispered to Jack. I recognize the markings on his uniform. Why would you expect us? Jack kept his weapon aimed at the alien. Because your species is proving impossible to harvest efficiently. The operation is failing, but the Admiral refuses to accept this. Kex Loren's eyes moved to Diane's work. Your virus will temporarily disable our network, but the Admiral has already called for planet killer weapons. They will arrive in 3 days. The team exchanged alarmed looks. Why are you telling us this? Susan asked. Because genocide is not science, it is waste. The alien scientist moved to another console. I can help you send a different message using the Admiral's authentication codes. A temporary delay. Why should we trust you? Alan demanded. You should not, but we have a common goal, preventing the destruction of this planet. Kex Lauren looked at them with large, sad eyes. I have studied humans for months. Your adaptability is remarkable. You are the first species to develop resistance to our harvesting, the first to fight back effectively. Jack lowered his weapon slightly. What's in it for you? Knowledge, and perhaps a different way. Not all Tarvani believe in the Empire's methods. Diane looked up from her work. The virus is ready. Jack made his decision. Do it, and let's see what our new friend can do. As the virus uploaded and Kex Lauren sent false orders, alarms suddenly blared throughout the building. We've been detected, the scientist said. We must hurry. Red lights flashed throughout the London hub as alarms screamed. Jack looked at Kex Lauren with suspicion. Did you trigger this? He demanded. The alien scientist shook his head. No, the system detected your virus. We have minutes before guards arrive. Diane worked frantically at the console. The virus is at 80%. We need more time. Follow me, Kex Lauren said. There is another way out. Jack hesitated, then nodded. They had no choice but to trust the Tarvani scientist. Kex Lauren led them through narrow maintenance corridors where Kilari workers normally moved. The sounds of boots and weapons grew louder behind them. The virus is uploaded, Diane said, checking her device. The network will shut down in 30 seconds. Right on time, the lights flickered and died. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in dull red. It worked, Susan whispered. We're not safe yet, Jack reminded them. They reached an exit that led to the underground tunnels. As they prepared to leave, Kex Lauren paused. I cannot go with you, he said. I must return to the fleet. Why? Susan asked. They'll punish you for helping us. They will not know, and I have important information. The alien scientist handed Jack a small silver disc, the coordinates of our homeworld, and the positions of our main fleet. Ellen looked suspicious. Why give us this? Because the Admiral will not stop. He cannot accept defeat. He will destroy your world rather than admit humans cannot be conquered. Kex Lauren's large eyes seemed sad. Not all Tarvani think like him. Some of us remember when we were explorers, not conquerors. With that, the scientist turned and disappeared back into the building. The team made their way through the tunnels to their extraction point. Above them, chaos erupted as Tarvani forces lost contact with each other. All across Earth, resistance groups attacked processing centers, freeing thousands of captives. Back at their temporary base, Jack contacted Lisa on the space station. Skywatch, this is Ground Leader. Operation successful. What's your status? Lisa's voice came through with static. The Tarvani fleet is in chaos. Ships are changing position, trying to re-establish communications. But I'm seeing something else. Her voice turned serious. A large vessel just entered Earth orbit, bigger than anything we've seen before. The planet killer, Jack said grimly. Kex Lauren warned us it was coming. Susan studied the data from the scientist's disk. According to this, the flagship carries Admiral Zexturian himself. If we could somehow disable it. How? Ellen asked. We can't reach orbit. Lisa's voice returned, now determined. Maybe you can't, but I can. She explained her plan. The space station still had maneuvering thrusters. With careful calculations, she could direct it into a collision course with the flagship's main weapon system. That's suicide, Jack protested. It's our only chance, Lisa replied. I've been up here alone for months. I've had time to think about what I'm willing to do for Earth. Silence fell over the room. They all knew she was right. Do it, Jack finally said, his voice heavy. And Lisa, thank you. High above Earth, Lisa made her final preparations. She had packed the station with all available fuel and oxygen tanks. The explosion would be significant. Beginning burn sequence, she radioed. Station repositioning in 3, 2, 1. The ISS slowly turned toward its new course. On her screens, Lisa could see the massive Tarvani flagship. Its weapon ports were opening, preparing to fire on the cities below. Course set. Final burn in 60 seconds. Her voice was calm. It's been an honor, everyone. Keep fighting. In Chicago, the team watched through a hacked feed as the space station accelerated toward the Tarvani ship. The aliens noticed too late. Defensive weapons fired, but missed the small target moving at increasing speed. The impact was blinding. The flagship's main weapon system exploded, causing a chain reaction. The massive ship began to tilt, fire spreading across its hull. She did it, Susan whispered, tears in her eyes. The crippled flagship fell from orbit, trailing fire as it descended toward Earth's surface. It crashed in the remote Arctic, far from populated areas. Jack stared at the screens. Lisa's sacrifice won't be wasted. We have 3 weeks before their reinforcements arrive. He held up Kexaloran's disk, and now we have their coordinates. For the first time, humanity had more than just resistance. They had a chance to win. 3 weeks after the flagship crashed, Earth looked different. Humans had taken back most major cities. The remaining Tarvani forces were scattered and disorganized without their admiral. In the ruins of what was once Washington, D.C., world leaders gathered. Not politicians who had hidden during the invasion, but resistance leaders who had fought. Jack Howard stood before them, his face tired but determined. "We've won battles, but not the war," he told them. "The Tarvani reinforcements will arrive soon, and they'll bring more planet killers." Diane stepped forward with a large device, using parts from captured ships. "We've built this. It can send a message faster than light across star systems." "To who?" someone asked. Susan answered, "The Galactic Council." Kexaloran's data mentioned them. They're an alliance of free species. The Tarvani have kept Earth isolated, prevented us from contacting them. "Why would these aliens help us?" a resistance leader from Africa asked. "Because the Tarvani have violated council law," Susan explained. "Harvesting sentient beings is forbidden. But the council doesn't know what's happening here." They agreed to send the message. Jack, Susan, and representatives from every continent prepared to travel to the crash site of the Tarvani flagship. The ship's long-range communication array was still intact. Ellen would stay behind to coordinate Earth's defenses. "Don't take too long," he told Jack with a grim smile. "I can't promise to save any Tarvani for you to fight." NX Vala and several Kilari joined the mission. "My people help humans," she said. "We show Council how Tarvani broke laws." The journey to the Arctic was difficult. The flagship had crashed on an ice shelf, and bitter cold surrounded them. Inside the wreckage, they found bodies of Tarvani officers, including Admiral Zexturian himself. His purple eyes stared lifelessly at the ceiling. They located the communication array and Diane connected their device. "We have one chance," she warned. "This will burn out after sending." Jack nodded, and Susan began to transmit. She spoke in multiple languages, including Kilari, explaining Earth's situation and the crimes committed by the Tarvani. "We ask for recognition and protection under galactic law," she concluded. "We have defended our world, but we cannot stand alone against their full fleet." They sent evidence, videos of processing centers, testimonies from freed prisoners, Kilari witnesses, and Kexaloran's data files. Then they waited, hoping someone would answer. 3 days later, as they prepared to leave the crash site, the array suddenly activated. A hologram appeared, a being unlike any they had seen, with golden skin and 4 eyes. "People of Earth," it said in perfect English, "I am Ambassador Zol of the Galactic Council. We have received your message and evidence. The Tarvani Empire has violated our most sacred laws." The ambassador explained that a council fleet was already en route to intercept the Tarvani reinforcements. Earth would be offered membership and protection. Your resistance has impressed many council species, the ambassador continued. Few have successfully fought the Tarvani. None have defeated an admiral. 2 years later, a joint fleet of human ships and council vessels approached Tarvani space. The ships had been built with council technology, but were crewed by humans. Admiral Jack Howard stood on the bridge of the lead vessel. Susan was beside him as Chief Communications Officer. On screens around them were allies, other species previously subjugated by the Tarvani, who had joined their cause after learning of Earth's resistance. We're receiving a transmission from Tarvani High Command, Susan reported. They're demanding our surrender. Jack smiled. Send our reply. On the main screen, the faces of the Tarvani High Command appeared. Their expressions showed shock as they saw humans commanding the fleet. This is Admiral Jack Howard of Earth, he began. We come not for dominance, but for justice. We don't demand that others kneel. We offer our hand to help them stand. As the liberated species stood together against their former oppressors, humanity found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or servants, but as those who taught the galaxy that true strength comes from refusing to break, no matter the odds. The Tarvani had wanted them to kneel. Humans had shown the galaxy how to stand.